Hello, Sweet Nation. How you doing? My name is Brendan Dunlop. This is Inside the Box with Brendan Dunlop, powered by Jackpot City Casino. Episode 3, and man, we got a good one for you. The weather's getting a little nicer, depending on what part of the continent you're in. It's still cold as hell in Toronto where I am, but at least it feels like soccer season is coming closer, and it definitely is. We'll get into the Major League Soccer Sportico list, the valuations list, because while Inter Miami, unsurprisingly, have the highest valuation in all of MLS at $1.45 billion, the Canadian teams aren't really ticking along. The business has been good for MLS, but that doesn't necessarily extend to Canada's 3 teams, and that could be a real issue, which we'll get into. Canada now have another winger to choose from. Marcelo Flores has completed his switch from Mexico to Canada, something Jesse Marsch has been working on, and I think will be great for the Canadian team. I'll dive into that, as well as talk about some other Canadian players that have been filling the back of the net. Promise David scoring in Belgium, Olivia Smith scoring in the Champions League for Arsenal. There's a lot of good Canadian stuff to get into, and we now know who Canada will play in their final tune-up game before the World Cup in June. So I'll dive into all that. Let's begin, though, with how you can get involved with us. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, we're on all the socials now, and I want to have some engagement with you. I want to have some banter. I want to have exchanges, as soccer fans always do. So on Instagram, we're InsideTheBox_show, and get at us on Twitter, where I'll throw out some challenges for you each week when I hit the slots, Inside_the_box on X. We'll also have our first guest today, MLS legend, the godfather of Major League Soccer, Canadian icon Dwayne De Rosario. Going to talk all things MLS, going to talk about his career and reflections on that, look ahead to the World Cup, which he would have loved to have been a part of as a player, and now will get to be a part of as an ambassador for Canada and an ambassador for FIFA, and one of the most recognizable faces in Canadian sport and certainly in Canadian soccer. And he's an MLS dad. He's got 2 sons playing in Major League Soccer. So we'll get into all that with Dwayne De Rosario a little bit later on in the show. All right, before we dive into Canada's big rise and Marcelo Flores and what his addition might mean for Canada, shout out to our sponsor, jackpotcitycasino.ca. I'm going to play the slots. Let's see if we can get some winners here, and I'll throw a question at you, okay? Give me your answer, get it on the Inside the Box Twitter, and let me know. Oh, $6. Here we go. Marcelo Flores. Will he start a game for Canada at the World Cup? Let me know on Twitter. I'm very curious to hear your take. Let's get another winner. Come on, Panda. Can we pull another victory? Yeah? Okay, $6. Add it up. Let's go. Big moments, big swings, 0 second chances. That's the thrill, and that's what you get at jackpotcitycasino.ca. Spin responsibly. Now let's get back inside the box. Marcelo Flores, Canadian, officially the Georgetown, Ontario-born winger who was capped 3 times for Mexico but hasn't been capped since 2023, who has been courted by Jesse Marsch and the Canadian men's national team, at least since the start of 2025. I got a feeling that those conversations existed maybe even before Jesse Marsch took the job in May of 2024. But as of officially now in February, the paperwork is done, the process went through, the switch is official. Marcelo Flores can pull on a red and white shirt for Canada in a competitive game. This is exciting. This is a player that Canadian fans had given up on, a player that Canadian fans had thrown in the pot with Jonathan de Guzman and Owen Hargreaves as players who were Canadian, who thought they were too good to play for Canada and didn't want to. That was never truly the case with Marcelo Flores. The climate was different. He was eligible to play for 3 countries, you might forget. Born in Georgetown, to Mexican parents, moved to England, played in Arsenal's academy, never broke through into the first team, but was someone who Arsene Wenger lauded and was really high on. And you can understand why the Mexican national team, the Mexican Federation, was also very quick and got him involved in their youth programs, which are more organized, more frequent, more consistent, and better competition for someone who already was competing at such a high level at Arsenal. So I never faulted the guy or held it against Marcelo Flores for being part of the Mexican program and wanting to be a part of the Mexican program, wanting to play for his parents' country. Canada soccer wasn't anywhere close to the situation that they are in now, where someone who's being courted by England and Mexico and Canada, where he's from, why someone like that, a teenager, would have their head turned. I also don't think that he ever truly closed the door for Canada, even when he accepted his first senior call-up in 2021 from Mexico. He's playing in Liga MX on one of the biggest teams on the continent at Tigres. He's scoring goals now, and he hasn't been in the Mexican picture for the last couple of years, much to the good fortunes of Canada, who now have him and have a system where I think he can play. Now, the first question is Marcelo Flores going to play for Canada at the World Cup? Well, they wouldn't be courting him if they didn't think he was worth putting in the squad. Does that mean he's going to start? I don't think he starts in the opening game, but given the fact that Canada are very much looking at this World Cup beyond just 3 group stage games, the goal is absolutely to get out of the group. The goal is to play again in Vancouver and potentially twice, with BC Place hosting a round of 32 and a round of 16 game. You're going to want all of the dangerous tools that you have available. And Marcelo Flores, albeit not a player that Mexico felt worthy of considering or didn't value at least for this World Cup cycle, is someone that brings a lot to this Canadian team. Now, I don't think he starts in that opening game. I really don't. But I do think Marcelo Flores will start for Canada at the World Cup. And injuries aside, I do think that Jesse Marsch will look at this tournament, particularly as it progresses and the results that they need, thinking about that matchup against Switzerland being the 3rd game, which I think stacks up great for Canada. You're going to want to have the opportunity to adapt and change things up. And I think one of Canada's biggest strengths now is they can tinker and adapt and still be on the front foot. Whereas before it was always reactive, and Canada didn't have the player pool to adapt, tinker, change at all. Just rolled the dice and hoped it worked this time. And if it didn't work against this opponent, well, roll the dice and hope it works against the next opponent. Now they can actually play and cater to their opponents. And Marcelo Flores gives them a lot of depth in an area in which Canada is already the strongest it's ever been in my lifetime on the wings. But you have depth and a challenger to maybe not Tajon Buchanan, a fully healthy Tajon Buchanan, but Ali Ahmed for sure, whose game is elevated and now at Norwich City is showing that he can play in Europe and that it wasn't a fluke, his breakout season in the Vancouver Whitecaps. I think Ali Ahmed is still deserving of a starting spot, but Marcelo Flores in the mix there, that is fantastic depth to have. When you already have Jacob Schaffelberg, who at his best in an international team shirt has been incredible, Liam Miller, who I think brings a lot to this team and will certainly be a part of the squad. Even in a 23-man squad, I think Liam Miller makes it. But to have the options and the rotation options to consider that Jesse Marsch will have now with Marcelo Flores, they're such a stronger team in that department, which already was such a strength. Not to mention that to have Alphonso Davies and Richie Larea on the pitch at the same time, you may want to use that left wing as a way to keep them both on the pitch. It's a very crowded midfield now. It's a very crowded attack as well. And Marcelo Flores, though, I think can support Jonathan David and whoever the other striker is up front in that 2-man setup to make it feel like a 3-man attack a lot. Same way Richie Larea does when he'd been on the other side, on the right side, and had it attacked at the front, often making it feel like it was a 3-man front line. Marcelo Flores will bring a lot. So I'm interested to see how Jesse Marsch works him into the team. It does seem like, introducing a player of that caliber and someone who clearly, publicly and privately has been courted because he was eligible to play for another country. I can understand why there might be this anticipation or this feeling that how's the room going to accept this guy? Do the players that are in that room and have got Canada to this point really want to bring in this new guy that wasn't playing for Canada? I think they do. I think they recognize what he brings to the team, but it also seems like, just from the one interaction in camp that they had in November in Canada, and then the feeling about having him in January, where he was named to the team, but because the switch hadn't gone through, he wouldn't have been eligible to play against Guatemala in that friendly unless it was closed door anyway. They wanted him there, and Jesse Marsch certainly does, and I think the players in that team know that it's healthy competition that he brings, and he does help to raise the level of everybody already in there. And that's the case with these super talented, technically gifted players. And Canada produced one. And he's developed outside of Canada. And now the national program gets a benefit from that. So I'm super excited. I think Marcelo Flores is a great fit and someone that could be an absolute star and a face of this team come the 2030 World Cup, but a big addition for 2026. We finally know Canada's full slate of games, tune-ups before the World Cup. That Montreal date was the only one outstanding where we knew they were playing in Montreal in June. We knew that was going to be the last one before the World Cup, before they turn up in Toronto for that June 12th World Cup opener against the UEFA playoff Path A winner. We just didn't know who it was going to be. Now we know it's the Republic of Ireland, who themselves are in a playoff, trying to reach the World Cup and be one of the 48 teams at the first ever 48-team FIFA World Cup. Ireland's a good test. It's not Turkey. Most people thought Turkey would be the nation that Canada books because of a couple of hints from European media, but also from Jesse Marsch, who had spoken on Hercules Gomez's podcast about Turkey being a team he was really interested in, have kept an eye on, thinks they would match up well against Canada and would be a good test. I have to assume that the Turkey Federation was in a conversation with Canada about booking a game, because I don't think Jesse Marsch makes those comments if that's not the case. And perhaps he was making those comments to try and either win his bosses and the powers that be on the Canadian soccer side of things, or on the Turkey side to make sure that that game happened. But Ireland's a good test. It's not the same, and if they fail to qualify in March through their playoff, I do think there'll be less motivation on the Irish part, certainly. It won't have the same stakes because they're not playing in the World Cup. But that's why Canada had booked these other opponents. Iceland's not playing in the World Cup either, but that game being in March, that game being in Toronto as a setup to these more important games in June, I think is pretty good. But when I look at the slate of those games that Canada Soccer booked, Iceland in Toronto, Tunisia in Toronto, both of those games in the March window. Then come June, you've got Uzbekistan in Edmonton, and now Ireland in Montreal. It's not a bad quartet. The difficult thing with being a host country is up until March, where teams had qualified, you really didn't have opportunity to book good teams and competitive teams because they were playing competitive, meaningful matches. They were playing World Cup qualifiers. I don't think that Canada books Colombia for that November window, October window it was, at the end of last year, if Colombia wasn't already miles ahead in CONMEBOL South American qualifying. They knew they were safe in qualifying. They were comfortable. They could work on things and tinker and practice. And Canada was a pretty good test, as we saw in a scoreless draw in New Jersey. Come March, the big nations that Canada would have loved to have attracted, and I know, had conversations with, but several of them didn't go past the opening, hey, we're Canada. Sorry, we're not interested. We're already talking to the States. We're already setting up dates with Mexico, Portugal, Germany, England, France. Those are the countries that you would love to have in Toronto or in Edmonton or in Montreal to get the country excited for what's to come. Because I think every Canadian seems to say, whether you're in the soccer space already or you're a casual and someone who's just excited for the World Cup coming, everybody I speak to says, man, I don't think this city's ready. Man, this country isn't ready for what's coming. And they don't just mean the people on the street who definitely, I think, en masse are not ready for what is actually coming. But infrastructure hasn't taken the leap that you would have hoped. The broadcast interest hasn't really taken the leap and the boost that you would have hoped. TSN has upped their coverage in the build up to it, as does every legacy broadcaster when it comes to gearing up and pushing for their own product. But I don't think we've seen the expansion and the accessibility to soccer that we would have liked to have seen over the last year. And now in the last 4 months here before the World Cup, it is just a tune-up and a final build for what will be this explosion come June 12th. To me, Tunisia, Iceland, Uzbekistan, Ireland doesn't move the needle for the casual. It's a good test tactically, good enough. I would have liked to have seen some of those big names that I mentioned, but I don't think you're getting more of Joe in Saskatchewan and Kelly in Oakville to get all of their friends and everybody over to the house to throw a big watch party for these World Cup games with that as the appetizer. This is the best and the strongest Canadian men's national team we've ever seen. This team is far better than the Canadian team that went to Qatar in 2022. I don't know if the hype and excitement is much higher than it was ahead of 2022. And this was the opportunity to do that. Now, that's not to fully blame Canada Soccer. I certainly don't envy being in that position and trying to book these games. I outlined how hard it is to book these games against countries and nations who have other things to play for. It's also expensive as hell to put these things on. And Canada Soccer has not been in a position where they've been able to do expensive things at a level that's high or matches the rest of the world, and certainly at a level that matches what's happening south of the border. So they were never going to get those A-list teams if U.S. Soccer was able to book them, which they did. I like this quartet. It prepares the team, but I do wish there was some more attractive names and players that could really get the country excited. I think that was a missed opportunity for Canada Soccer as a whole. When it comes to Canada's attack, this is the deepest it's ever been. I talked about on the last show in episode 2. Go and check it out on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Inside the Box Show. You can find all of our episodes. There's been a 5-player, not even rotation, but it does seem a 5-player selection from Jesse Marsch. And we all know who the first 4 guys are. The order of which we all know Jonathan David is number 1. But whether Kyle Larin is still number 2, that's the big debate. He started well at Southampton. He needs to continue to fill the back of the net in order to have a stake of that place. It's not his place to lose anymore. I think it's his place to win because it's wide open. Tony Oluwase, bagging goals at Villarreal, had a fantastic transition from Minnesota United. That's a player that seems to be in pole position. But man, Promise David is good. Promise David maybe doesn't make for the best pairing and matchup as a player next to Jonathan David. But Promise David gives you so much up front and is the profile of a player that Canada just has not had before. And his success in Belgium so far has been incredible. He helped Union Saint-Gilloise to the first Belgian League title in 90 years last year. To a lot of people's surprise, he stuck around. He scored in the Champions League, 2 goals in 7 games in the Champions League. He continues to score in Belgium. He's got 9 league goals already in 20 games. He's scoring in the League Cup, the Crocky Cup or the Croaky Cup, whatever they call it in Belgium, to get Union Saint-Gilloise to the final, scored again in the semifinal. Man, he's really performed. 4 goals in 5 games that was, by the way, in the League Cup to get them there. Off of the bench, he's an incredible super sub. But I think, I talk about adaptability and changing things up based on your opponent. There's an opportunity here for him to play and where you'd be better off starting Promise David in certain situations. I do think we'll see Promise David start in one of those next 4 games in the lead up. Will he start against Ireland in Montreal? Would you start against Uzbekistan, who are playing at the World Cup and you really using Canada as a tool to prepare themselves for their first World Cup? I got to think that Promise David starts in one of those games. I think that he needs to, and I think he's a real option for Jesse Marsch to start in a World Cup game. So you got to see it in this tune-up. And the way that he's scoring, he's only entertaining. That's a player that's going to draw the casuals and really hook, I think, the attention from people who may not have been paying attention before, and most people who don't know Promise David's name. He wasn't even on the map at this time last year. If you were really in the weeds, you knew that he should have been, and you knew that Canada Soccer were talking to him and wanted to work him in, but it was the Nations League in March that was his first opportunity to come to a Canada camp, his first call-up. And now he's in this conversation to be a potential starter, and perhaps in certain situations should be a starter. I think that's been great. The start that Olivia Smith has had to her Arsenal career has also been fantastic. Olivia Smith, the Canadian women's national team face of the program, in the absence of the legends who have departed, like Christine Sinclair and Sophie Schmidt and Diana Matheson. Make no mistake, Olivia Smith is a superstar and is the face of this Canadian women's program, and now plays on the best team in Europe and is scoring in the best league in women's football, in the Women's Champions League. Another goal this week for Arsenal as they opened up a fantastic tie against OH Leuven in the round of 16. Arsenal would be the bookies' favorites, most bookies' favorites, to win again the Women's Champions League. So a great start for her. 4 goals in 4 games now. I think there was a worry with how deep Arsenal are that Olivia Smith would struggle for minutes. That really hasn't been the case. Struggled for fitness more, but that is the case at that level of football in general, and you hope that she can be healthy over the course of the next year, because 2026 is going to be a really important year for the Canadian women's national team. 2025, to be honest, was a disaster. It wasn't a complete chaotic disaster. It could have been worse, certainly, but they did not take the steps forward under Casey Stoney in a first full year under the new head coach that they would have expected. And I think 2025 exposed a lot more holes in the Canadian women's program than we all would have liked to admit, or all would have liked to have accepted actually existed. Olivia Smith is an engine. Olivia Smith is a goal scorer and is a player that is making the players around her better in this national program. I think you're going to see that over the course of this year. So to see her scoring goals for Arsenal, to see her scoring in the Champions League and playing a key part for the biggest team in England is fantastic. And I want to see more of that from Olivia Smith. Very happy for my first guest to be someone that I have had the privilege of getting to know very well and had the privilege of writing his life story in D-Row My Life. The MLS godfather himself, Dwayne De Rosario. D-Row, what's up, man?
Good afternoon, man. Great to see you again.
Great to see you too. I love that we're both in the podcast space.
Yeah.
Like you can add that to your list. MLS legend, Canada captain, now podcaster. How's that space been, man? D-Row and the Die Hard. How have you enjoyed being in the podcast world?
It's unique. It's interesting. And I'm actually enjoying it. You know, I'm really enjoying our D-Row and the Die Hard episodes. We just wrapped up episode 21 today. So, you know, it's talking about football, local football, world football, and of course, World Cup that's going to be here in our hometown, in our country, which I still kind of can't believe. It's surreal that it's actually coming, but I can't wait. So it's been a fun journey. It's been an interesting journey, very similar to writing our book together and going through those many hours of diving deep into my personal life and, you know, expressing it through the book that you did so eloquently. And now with the Die Hard, Ben here with me, you know, just, you know, really enjoying this podcast journey.
Nice, man. Well, you've always been someone who's never, you know, shied away from telling it like it is. Like you've always had a strong voice, and we've been able to see that evolve over the years from being the young guy who had the Scarborough slang every time the camera was in front of him that you never shied away from, to being the vocal leader and the captain who would challenge the brass that we all appreciated. And yeah, telling your personal story in the book. And now to get your soccer opinions, man, is pretty great. Yeah. You did touch on the World Cup coming, which I also can't believe is just around the corner. Do you think Toronto and do you think Canada is ready for what's coming, man?
I would like to think so. No, because we haven't experienced what football at this level. We've experienced soccer. We haven't experienced football. We haven't experienced the world's game. We haven't experienced the culture, the passion, and what it really means, and how it affects, you know, different emotions, and you know, and we're gonna see that. And I'm excited for that part. I'm excited for the non-soccer fan to get a little inclination of what football is all about on a global scale. But not only the fan, but also our city councilors, our decision makers, our broadcasters that really play a big part in whether, you know, our editors, whether football is on the front page or on the backstory of sports, you know, and hopefully they could, you know, get a good grasp of why it should be up there with the front stories and most prominent stories in our sports. And we're gonna feel it in our hometowns. We're gonna feel it through the streets. We're gonna feel it through our communities. And hopefully after that is a positive domino effect towards growth of the game in this country, in the city.
I tell people all the time that whether it's the Euros, whether it's the World Cup, one of the best places in the world to consume that tournament is in Toronto, because you can dine with every culture, you can party with people from everywhere, and now you're going to have the world coming to our city and coming to Toronto, which I think is going to be great for, honestly, for everything except for traffic.
Oh yeah,
It's going to be a disaster.
Well, that's the question mark, right? How are people going to get to and from games, logistically, parking, transportation wise, but we have to put trust in our city officials that are making those decisions in transportation, that they're going to do what is needed to make sure that this games run smoothly in that respect and people aren't having a negative experience. And I think the whole world is going to be watching. So it's very important that we showcase to not only the FIFA but to the world. We are equipped to host a major sporting event here.
When I look back at your career and playing for Canada, how close some of your teams came to making the World Cup, or how much that meant to you to play in a World Cup and be on that team. And you had some great players around you, from Thibaut Hutchison, Julien de Guzman, Patrice Bernier. When you look at this team now, who you've gotten to know closer and now as an ex-player, and you were involved in one of Jesse Marsch's camps as a coach, right? I forget which month it was, but you were in the mix as a coach. How good is this Canadian men's national team now?
I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, they're electric. They're an attacking team. They're an aggressive team, very athletic team, and it's really tribute to what MLS has been able to create, not only for my career, but for these young kids. I mean, if you look across the board, a lot of these kids are prospects from MLS, whether that's through the academy stream and they've left early out the academy stream, or has played with the first team and have went above and beyond. Of course, there's a few great stories, like Anastakio that maybe left a little earlier before those streams, but knowing that the footprint is here now and kids could really play and compete at a high level every day in, day out, as they do in Europe, creates what we see on the field today, creates that passion, creates that, they're equipped in these environments to make positive decisions because they've competed in these environments from very young. And of course, we have, in our generation, we've had players playing all over the world in top clubs, but they weren't playing consistently. Where we see now, our players are actually playing. So they're not just at big clubs, but they're actually playing and having an impact, which is vital towards our preparation leading into June 12th, our kickoff here in Toronto.
When you think about your career for Canada, is there one story that's your quick go-to tell story? What's one of your biggest memories, best memories for playing for Canada?
You know what? Every story is an amazing story for me, in the sense of every time I put on that Canadian jersey, I just think about all the sacrifices my parents made to leave, their country, Guyana, to come to the unknown, in a place that, was extremely difficult and different from what they've experienced. So to represent Canada really shows gratitude to my parents for making that journey and that sacrifices to create a better life for us. And I would like to say that was my way of saying thank you. So every time, I'd never turn down a call up, even though sometimes I probably should have thought a little bit better, because some of our travel conditions were horrendous back then in some of the places we were playing, man. But it was just, for me, turning down a call up wasn't an option, because I always was honored to be called by our national team. And it's one that I always felt the obligation to represent the best way possible, even though sometimes I was nursing an injury or I was extremely tired of a lot of minutes or games leading into that. But I always put the flag first, and I always put my country first. And I know the players that represent our country now do the same thing, because it's not just us. It's the sacrifices you make as a kid. It's a sacrifice for the journey, and you can never lose sight of that. Or you should never lose sight of that, because it's bigger than just us. It's our community. It's our family. We represent our all the players that we played with on our journey. So every time I step on the field, I just try to represent that the best way I can, the most authentic way I can, and the way I know how to do it. I
love listening to the players on this team now, who are now veterans, but when you were the veteran in your final days for Canada, they were the youngsters just coming through. And to hear them talk and say things in a very similar way to the way you speak, and they hold the same values. I'm thinking of Jonathan Osorio and the way he describes playing for Canada. I hear so much, D-Ro in that, and someone that I know that you were close with and have I've watched very closely. When you look at this Canada team and how this group stacks up, I think the fixture list is very much in their favor, with those 2 games in Vancouver being Qatar first, the second game in the group, and then Switzerland, the third game. That opener, likely against Italy, will be electric. It's going to be an incredible moment for the city of Toronto. How do you think that Jesse Marsch's team stacks up in that group?
Well, I wouldn't put Italy in there just yet.
No,
Italy has a very steep mountain to climb. Let's be honest here. It's not, the first game, 2 games I think is away, right? Or 1 game's at home. The first game's at home and the second one could potentially be away in Bosnia, I believe, or Wales, right?
Mm-hmm.
2 very difficult places to play and to get points out of against a Italian team who are still trying to, I think, find their identity. But it doesn't matter who we play. I think the group is difficult. I'm not going to say it's an easy walkover. I think Qatar has invested a lot of resources into their national team, into their program. So it's not the Qatar we know. I mean, since they've qualified or hosted the World Cup, they've put a lot of resources into their national team. And then, of course, you have Switzerland, who's always been a factor and a force to be reckoned with every World Cup, qualifying from Europe year after year after World Cup after World Cup. They're not an easy team. They're very each team poses a different threat. As we know, Switzerland are very direct. They're very strong. They're good in the air. Set pieces is going to be very worrisome against a team like that. And if we place the way we've been playing lately, giving up free kicks and set pieces in our defensive third, it could be a tough game for us. So it's very important that we're going to have to manage our emotions differently against a Switzerland team than against a Qatar team. But you're right. I think when you take everything into account, regarding, more teams are able to qualify, I think our chances are very great. Obviously, our goal as a nation is to come first in that group and represent very strongly and come out that group on top. But if we don't, at least we know there's 2 other spots available that we can easily make it to the next group phase. And let's not mix words here. That is our goal. And I know that's Jesse Marsch's goal. And that's anything other than that would be a complete failure. Right? Just showing up and being there is not enough anymore. We did that in Qatar. We've got the experience under our belt. We know what the World Cup is like. We in a very tough group, Mad, right? Where two of those nations actually made it to the final 4, right? So that's or the final round, the semifinals, right?
Yeah, the semis,
but in saying that, it would be a huge disappointment, which I don't want to put too much energy towards if we don't make it, because I'm very confident with the team we have, with the caliber of players that we have, with the experience we have now. Favors are definitely pointing our directions to not only make it out that group, but to come first in that group, especially with our 12th man, the home crowd.
I can't wait to see what things will be like in Vancouver and in Toronto, especially for that opening game. I do wish that there was a few other matchups that could have been potential games in Toronto to really have that World Cup atmosphere and experience. There's a possibility of England playing in Toronto. I would have loved to see that.
Portugal,
but Germany, Ghana,
Brazil.
I would have loved, of course, to have seen Portugal
Argentina,
or Brazil in Toronto too.
The list goes
on.
on.
Germany, Ghana, Ivory Coast, they're going to make an atmosphere. They're going to make it exciting.
Yes.
We all know that the atmosphere at BMO Field for Toronto FC games, even before the team was good enough to attract you from Houston, as the team was building, some of those days in the sun before the renovations, like the atmosphere at BMO Field is incredible.
Fantastic.
Toronto FC has changed a lot. It's gone through a different era, a real rebuilding era. As we're recording this interview, the season kicks off in about 2 weeks. When you look at MLS as a whole, not to get into TFC specifically, the money is insane now. The Sportico valuations list just came out. There's 5 teams that are valued at over $1 billion. No surprise, Inter Miami is the highest. And the Canadian teams, well, Toronto FC in the middle and Vancouver and Montreal being at the very bottom. Does it surprise you how much money is in Major League Soccer now, or was this just long overdue and you knew that the league was going to grow into what you're seeing?
Oh, 100%. And I think that's one thing, let's be honest, when it comes to American sports, right? They want to be the best in everything they do. And I think there's nothing wrong with that mentality because they're willing to spend what it takes to be the best. Year after year, we've constantly seen the emergence of the growth of the game in the U.S. with our neighbors, with their sheer facilities, and I remember as kids when I was growing up, we would go, oh, they're state champions. Okay, yeah, we go beat up on them, beat up on all these state champions, and we're coming from Malvern. That's a different conversation today, and because they've pumped resources into first the grassroots level of, beautiful pitches are dime a dozen all over the U.S. You can find them anywhere, right? You go to a lot of these complexes, and I call them soccer complexes in North America, and there's 8, 9, 10 immaculate fields, right? Side by side by side, all over the US. So that's going to always encourage, the growth of the game, especially at the grassroots level. And that impact is coming from MLS because you're seeing, sold out stadiums. You're seeing soccer specific stadiums. That's mandatory now in the MLS. You're seeing grass stadiums. My son plays for the Sounders and they're averaging like 57,000. That's astronomical numbers when you think about the sports world and the cost of living and stuff like that. People are still going out and supporting the games. You mentioned, BMO, we've had many difficult years and the fans are still there, sleet, rain, snow, supporting their team. And that's just exactly what, this game evokes. And I think the MLS is only going to get stronger and stronger, bigger, especially with the changing of the seasons next year. And we align with the European season. That means it's an open market. So now we're going to see a lot younger international talents coming to and from MLS. And it's going to create a direct opportunity to have that transfer windows. And you're going to see top players moving from some of the bigger clubs, like the Barças, Real Madrids, Arsenals. I'd like to put that one in there because they're first in Europe right now. But Bayern's, that it's going to be a constant now during the season. Hey, you know what? This player just got picked up by Bayern. Hey, we just bought a player from Bayern, a 22-year-old, 23-year-old. So it creates an open market, which is going to create more excitement and more interest around the game. America, as we know, are not afraid to pump money into development of soccer in this country. And I know with just the World Cup coming here and what it's going to leave, it's only going to get bigger. Obviously, from what we saw from 94 and MLS was created in 96. So you can only imagine what's going to happen after 2026.
I wasn't going to ask you this, but since you mentioned it, give me your quick take on the season change. Because there's some cold ass games in Toronto.
I don't know how they're going to do it. To be honest, to make it fair, it's going to be interesting. I know a lot of these facilities, as we do at BMO, we have the heating system under the field. So the grass itself is going to look nice. Now the fans, we're going to have to really consider doming the top, or having some majority of it covered, right? Like they do in a lot of the European stadiums, which again, it raises the bar, right? I mean, look at what we're seeing, the transformation of BMO Field right now here in Toronto. I mean, as we prepare for the World Cup, right? It's got to be FIFA standard. And I think that's great. I mean, we're one of the biggest sporting group on the planet with MLSE, and what other way to show that than to pump money into a soccer specific stadium? Our valuations, I think we bought in at 15 or 20,000 at MLS market value in 2007. We're evaluated at $500 million right now, over $500 million. So a lot of that money could go towards putting that field together, which it is, but now, can we keep a lot of those stands, right? Can we really keep that and encourage more and more fans to come out and support it? And then, of course, you just got to put a roof on it, a solid roof, or like they do at the Sky Dome, a retracted roof, which would be pretty cool for a soccer space. And, just really pump a lot of interest and investment into this game because there's no turning back now. And that's what I like. There's no turning back. So all these people that hold high positions at Canada Soccer that is dealing with FIFA right now, and they're like, oh, FIFA's hard to deal with. No, that's the standard. That is the world football standard that we need to live up to now and understand that that's where our players need to be. That's where our game needs to be. And I'm happy for it. I'm excited, and I'm excited for the youthfulness, energy that's being projected into this game, the arts side of it that's being projected into the game, and I think the holistic development of this sport in this country, which I'm happy to be a part of as well.
Let's end on this important one for me. I got to get your take on it. I introduced you as the godfather of MLS. You are one of the 25 greatest players. You'll always be revered for what you did as a player on the pitch. But now you're an MLS father, with Osaze in Seattle with the Sounders, and Adisa, a goalkeeper now with Toronto FC. What's that been like for you, just to watch both of your sons follow in your footsteps and play in MLS?
It's been an amazing journey, just to be there, as you said, the key word, as a father, first and foremost. Not all the fancy titles that you said before of me being a player, but as a father, I'm extremely proud, extremely happy to have nurtured two of my children to pursue a game that has brought me so much joy, that has brought so much to my family, my community. So to now see my kids go through it has been, it's been an amazing journey. But nonetheless, it's still been a journey. There's been ebbs and flows, highs and lows, and every experience that they've gone through, I've been through myself on my own personal journey, and certain things you can't avoid. You have to go through it, and you have to go through it by yourself, and you have to overcome it by yourself. And I'm just grateful to be there as a guiding voice, as a voice of encouragement, but also a voice of grounding. And keeping their feet on the ground and keeping their head on the ground, and showing them that this is a long journey. And if you've done something big today, tomorrow's forgotten. So you got to keep working hard towards making sure those moments continue more and more, because as my son won Nation League against Inter Miami last year against Messi, and he scored that game-winning goal, I was like, this is the beautiful thing. This is what you train hard for. This is why daddy tries to get you up early in the morning and put in that extra work for, is because of this moment. But now that you live this moment, guess what? Tomorrow it's gone. And now it's like, okay, can you fuel your passion now to create more moments like that for the future? And then, of course, with my goalkeeper, is just encourage him. He's young in the fold. He just signed with the first team at TFC. And I'm proud because, he's representing my hometown now, and, all the excitement around the game. And then I got another young goalkeeper in on the rise, a 13-year-old who's going to be 14 next month, that is following in his brother's footsteps and our footsteps, and he wants to be pro too. So, you know what? It's been an amazing journey. It's an amazing ride, and I just love to sit back as a father and as a patron to see my kids play and just smile in silence. But my heart's full with joy.
It's been amazing to watch them. I love the on-field moment you had after Osaze won Leagues Cup there against Messi's Miami to share there. It was super special. So, man, it's been great to hear your voice and to hear you on D-Row and the Die Hard. Thanks for coming Inside the Box, my man, and I can't wait for the World Cup. We'll have to talk again soon.
I appreciate you, man, and congratulations on your new podcast, Inside the Box. Keep it locked.
D-Row My Life, the story of Dwayne De Rosario. This was one of the best things in my professional career, one of my best moments. It was a long time, as we spoke about there. Actually, it was a 4-year process to get it out, but you can find it on Amazon or any major book retailer. Came out in 2021, but there's still some real gems in there, and really recapped his entire career as a person, as a player, the death of his father, now being a father. It's been incredible to see how life has gone for Dwayne De Rosario, and now his 2 kids playing in MLS. There's a lot more money in MLS, as we were talking about. The Sportico list of team valuations continues to go up, and now with 5 teams in the $1 billion range, I don't think you'd be surprised that both LA teams, New York, Atlanta, in there behind Miami at $1.45 billion. Look, on paper, this is fantastic for the league. This is, as Dwayne hinted, exactly what they were building to and envisioned and hoped for when the league started 20 years ago. And there was some really lean years. There was contraction in the beginning. They had to fold a couple of teams. It didn't seem like expansion to 20 was possible at the time when Toronto FC bought in 2006 for the 2007 season. All that followed after the success in Toronto and the success in the stands was expansion. More and more and more and more, from west to the south, with teams in Charlotte and Atlanta paying $200 million, $350 million expansion fees. When Toronto FC came into MLS for the 2007 season, that expansion fee was $10 million. $10 million. San Diego FC, the 30th team that launched last year, paid a $500 million expansion fee, which is wild. Which is why, when you look at these team valuations and you see Inter Miami at $1.45 billion, you see New York City and Atlanta over $1 billion, Toronto FC exactly in the middle, 15th, with a valuation that hasn't really changed from last year at $730 million. But at the bottom, the last two teams are the other two Canadian teams. Vancouver, the Whitecaps, I've gone through their chaos on Inside the Box here already. Go check out those videos if you haven't heard my opinions on that. And the fear of the Whitecaps actually relocating. Their valuation was $450 million, down from last year. And CF Montreal are at $430 million, which means if you are a city without a franchise, rather than looking at the head office and wondering if they would be open to another expansion team, you're looking at Montreal and Vancouver as franchises to buy to relocate to whatever likely sunny, beautiful destination you're from. And that is terrifying for Canadian soccer. So for all the good that Dwayne and I talked about and all of the good in Canadian soccer that's happening at the moment, a reality where you do not have 3 Canadian teams in MLS feels very possible. And I think that would be a huge, huge loss for those markets, for the players, for the fans, and also for the league as a whole. I don't think it would be great for MLS to be just an American league. I think the Canadian teams bring a lot. And just because you don't always see it economically, I think the 3 Canadian franchises bring so much to MLS. So I really hope that the situations in both Montreal and Vancouver improve, and that in Toronto it continues to grow and not go backwards, because the gap between the teams with money and who continue to increase these valuations, that's the thing we have to remember. It doesn't mean that Inter Miami are the richest team. Sure, they have the biggest spending capital because they've got the face of the league, but it's not real money for all these franchises. But as they continue to increase in value, it will leave the others behind. And the Whitecaps and Montreal have definitely been left behind in a lot of ways. So I hope that more success on the pitch for the Whitecaps this season with Thomas Muller, maybe the attraction of another key piece. I mean, the Chicago Fire seem in on Robert Lewandowski. And if the Polish superstar leaves Barcelona for MLS, it does seem like Chicago would be a more likely landing spot. But don't discount that relationship with Thomas Muller, and don't discount the ambition for the people in charge running the Whitecaps right now. Ownership has financially committed to building this team, more so than some other MLS markets. And while they haven't spent like Toronto FC in the past, Muller was no small acquisition. And the opportunity to build around him or add some pieces to build around an already strong core with Ryan Gauld and Brian White, I think that the Whitecaps are very much primed to bring in a former Bayern Munich friend, and Robert Lewandowski would be fantastic. I don't think that's going to happen, but that is someone that would boost your overall club valuation. And in this scenario where ownership is still very much looking to sell, yes, with the hope that the new owners would keep the team in Vancouver, having another piece like that would really help to get the Whitecaps off the bottom the next time these valuations come out. So look, it doesn't mean everything, these Sportico valuations, but it was definitely concerning to see that the only 2 teams in decline were the 2 Canadian teams outside of Toronto, who already are financially at the bottom of the table. And it was reflected in the actual league table this past season with CF Montreal and the awful start that they had. I do think to Dwayne's point about having better equipped indoor stadiums, the advantage in this new calendar that Montreal has is they can just go inside next door at Olympic Stadium. And sure, it's not a fantastic venue. It needed a lot of work. They spent a lot of money. It'll open and they'll still need to put more money in because that's just how Olympic Stadium has been cursed. And that poor city, Montreal, has been fitting the bill for 5 decades for that stadium. But at least they have the opportunity to go inside to sell more tickets, and they're not worrying about the weather. In Toronto, they're going to worry about it. In Minnesota, they're definitely worrying about it. In a lot of MLS's other cold markets. So it will be very interesting to see how the valuations and how the money changes in MLS as years go on, but particularly with this calendar shift. And I very much hope that the Canadian teams are a part of it, and a huge part of it. Well, that just about does it for this episode of Inside the Box with Brendan Dunlop, powered by Jackpot City Casino. Thanks for tuning in. I'm back every Monday and Thursday with brand new topics to hit you with. I'll have some new guests. Big shout out to Dwayne De Rosario, for coming on and being my first guest on Inside the Box. It only made sense, and I'm glad that you were here for a part of it. So enjoy the weekend, everybody. Thanks for kicking it with me.